Welcome back, everyone. And okay, I have a couple questions. Number one, what about the Jesuits and the president? And were they afraid of the Freemasons? What did they say? Okay. Well, the good news is I have a lot of ideas for future shows, right? And Meg says I'm probably sick because I can't shut up. No, she didn't say that. No, and yes, that's true. That's absolutely true. I do wear a corset. What? Well, not anymore. Anyways, don't let me lose focus. Okay, about the Jesuits and the Freemasons and the presidents. Okay, we will do a show on that. I'm writing that down because that's going to be a whole thing. That's going to be a big thing. As for when the Americans got their official independence, were the backers by other countries? Yes, as a matter of fact, Morocco was 100% backing, and they also had ships in the harbor to make sure that France would not attack. Yeah. Morocco and Russia were incredible backers, so the whole thing of the Cold War was a lie. Russia was 100% behind the United States right from the onset. But, as the bankers took over and Lord knows what else, that was gone. And yes, Morocco was there because of agreements they had with the First Peoples here. Hold on one sec, guys. Okay, return of the gold standard, and then I will give my voice a rest because I didn't realize how much I had put together for this one, so it's going to be long. Anyway, Lincoln is gone. Money changers' next objective was complete control of the world. No easy task, of course, and America also specifically targeted, right? Despite this, the bankers continued to attack Lincoln's greenback, which I didn't know that you guys still had, but you did. April 12, 1866, nearly 1 year after the assassination, Congress began to work for the interest of the international banking interests, specifically. Completely taken over by then. Passing the Contraction Act, authorizing the Secretary of the Treasury to begin retiring the greenbacks, thereby contract the money supply, which, again, as we've said before, has always been done. Hard times then occurred after the Civil War, obviously, could have been avoided actually completely. If the greenback legislation had continued as the president had intended, there would have been no hard times. Instead, there were a series of manufactured panics known as recessions, which put pressure on Congress to enact legislation to put the banking system under the bankers' elusive control. Eventually, the Federal Reserve Act passed December 23rd, 1913. So we're back at the beginning. Under this act, the money changers once again had complete control. The central banking system, American currency, was again banked by gold, which they had owned, which is why there was a conquest of this planet, why gold is stolen in such incredible amounts, why it always has been. Strategy was to cause a series of panics to convince the American people who only centralized control of the U.S. banking money could actually provide stability. Step 2 was to remove so much money from the system that most Americans would be so desperately poor that they didn't care or would be too weak to oppose the bankers. So, just a couple facts here. 1966, there's about $1.8 billion in currency in the States. 1 year later, $500 million had been removed from circulation. 10 years after that, the American money supply had been reduced to only $600 million. So again, $1.8 billion in 1866. In 1876, it was down to $600 million. 10 years after that, the money supply continued to be reduced. It was only $400 million. That is a 760% loss in buying power over 20 years. And I can give you facts that'll blow your mind, but I realize nobody cares about this stuff, Trace. Another 4 paragraphs explaining what I just said. It means that you lost 760% in 20 years. So how did the money supply become scarce? Simply, loans were called in. No loans were issued. In addition, silver coins were melted down, disappeared. In 1872, one man was given 100,000 pounds, about $500,000 by the Bank of England, sent it to America to bribe congressmen to get silver demonetized. He was told that if that was not sufficient, to draw an additional 100,000 pounds. Now we're talking about 1872. There's a big chunk of change here to take the money that he would need for this. And yes, we have a name, Ernest Syed, whose name will become familiar to you in the next couple days. Very interesting. I didn't know it was that guy. Anyway, the next year Congress passed the Coinage Act, 1873, Syed actually drafting the legislation himself. Year after that, Syed admitted who was behind the scheme and told everyone. By 1873, gold coins were the only form of coin money in the States. In 1876, only 3 years later, 1/3 of America's workforce was unemployed. Population was growing, of course, desperate. People wanted to go back to the greenback system or return to the silver money. Anything that would make money at least more plentiful, available. That year, Congress created the U.S. Silver Commission to study the problem. Their report claimed money retraction and said it was the international bankers. The report declared that deliberate money contraction after the Civil War to the fall of the Roman Empire. They said it was the same. And if you listen from the beginning of my talk on this yesterday, that's exactly how it happened. Word for word. It's the same as how the Sumerians fell. Disaster of dark ages still caused by decreasing money, falling prices, by the exact same methods. Without money, civilization cannot have had a beginning, and with a diminishing supply, it must languish, and unless relieved, it will perish. During the Christian era, the metallic money of the Roman Empire amounted to about $1 billion. Well, 1,800,000,000. By the end of the 15th century, it went to $200 million. So, people had money. History records no such disastrous transition from the Roman Empire to the Dark Ages. U.S. Silver Commission. Despite this report, Congress took no action. The following year, the starving masses rioted from Pittsburgh to Chicago, which is the end of this kind of cycle always. The torches of starving vandals lit up the American sky. Bankers huddled to decide what to do. They decided to hang on. They were in power. They were not about to give it up. And at a meeting of the American Banking Association, they urged their memberships to do anything in their power to cut down the notion of the return to greenbacks. Do anything. Anything that needed to be done. The ABA Secretary, James Beoff, authored a letter which blatantly called on the banks to subvert not only Congress, but also the press. This one happened officially. It is advisable to do everything in your power to sustain such a prominent daily and weekly newspapers, especially amongst the agricultural and the religious press. Strike them first, as will oppose the greenback issue of paper money, and that you also withhold patronage from all applicants who are not willing to oppose the government issue of money. This is when it happened, and that's who went first. To repeal the act creating banknotes, to restore circulation of the government issue of money will be to provide people with money and therefore seriously affect our individual profits as bankers and lenders. See your Congress at once and engage him to support our interest that we may control legislation. So, in walks the lobbyists. It all happened in one bunch. As political powers tried to push for change, press, now working with bankers, one by one, taken over, turned the people away from the truth. In 1878, the New York Tribune wrote, "The capital of the country is organized at last, and we shall see whether Congress will dare to fly in its face." Didn't work 100%. Now, February 28, 1878, Congress passed Sherman Law, allowing the minting of limited amount of silver dollars, ending with a 5-year hiatus. This did not end the gold backing of the currency, nor did it completely free silver either. It was a show. As a result, bankers finally freed up money for loans, and post-Civil War depression ended for a little while. 3 years later, American people voted in James Garfield, 20th president this time. He would survive a mere 200 days in office. He was assassinated. Garfield understood the manipulation of money. He had been a chairman of an appropriation committee and a member of Banking and Currency Board. After his inauguration, he slammed the money changers publicly. Within weeks of making a statement, he was assassinated. Free silver, crown of thorns, cross of gold.